The sun rose on the 14th of July over the British Isles, and little did we know that we'd be treated to one of the best Grand Prix I have seen in a long time. And not only that, Britain offered up a day of sporting drama that left some with headaches, some with nervous laughter, but for me with severe cardiac arrhythmia, since while Leclerc and Verstappen were out dueling at Silverstone, Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic were playing one of the greatest tennis finals of all time, and the New Zealand and English cricket teams were going hammer and tongs toward a photo finish. What a joy to have witnessed a day like today, but to be honest, I now need serious psychotherapy to recover from all that drama. Hello and welcome to the Formula 1 Show. I am Tinas Ferreira, your slightly jaded and traumatized host, since I've just had to watch Roger Federer lose a 5-hour Wimbledon final after having too much points late in the 5th set. But no matter, we will be strong and soldier on, since as I mentioned in the intro, we've had an incredible day of sport. And what an amazing Grand Prix we had. There was so much action I literally couldn't keep track of it all. I also had at least 3 suspicious cardiac episodes, and I suspect I might be the first person in history to have forgotten a whole Daniel Kvyat existed right up until the end of the race, where I all of a sudden realized he finished in the points, which is an amazing achievement. But more about him later. Let's quickly take a quick look at the TF1 Stats Corner and discuss how well I was able to predict the British Grand Prix qualifying times. Now, if you can call Federer's day at Wimbledon the biggest disaster of the weekend, my predictions of the average qualifying times were a close second. I was more than a second too slow. I predicted Mercedes would average 1:26.2s, when in actual fact they managed a 1:25 dead. So that was more than a second out. Now, for my own ego's sake, I'm going to blame the fact that the track was resurfaced this year, so that obviously invalidated all of the analysis I did and basically meant that there was no way that I would have been able to predict accurately what times the teams was able to do. So let's move along swiftly. In terms of predicting the positions, though, I did a much better job. Well, I did predict, I guess that's not that big of an achievement, but I did predict Mercedes to be first and Ferrari to be close behind, with Red Bull in third place. So I guess pretty standard prediction there. But I did also predict Renault to be fourth fastest and McLaren to be fifth, which was the case. So I'm pretty proud of that, having predicted Renault to make a bit of a comeback this weekend. And then predicted Haas to be next in line, which was a bit silly in hindsight, but whatever. After that, I had Alfa Romeo and Toro Rosso quite close together, which was in real life indeed the case. And then Racing Point and Williams bringing up the rear. So I'll give myself a solid 80% for predicting the order of the teams. But I'm definitely going to have to revise my prediction strategy for the German Grand Prix and hopefully be a bit closer in terms of lap time. But I'll keep you guys all in the loop on that. Okay, so let's talk about the race and just how amazing was that. I mean, after the first few laps, with Hamilton and Bottas going around and challenging each other, and Verstappen and Leclerc and Gasly and Vettel all, running within 1 or 2 seconds of each other, I was captivated and I was just having the best time. So yeah, I mean, it was great racing left, right and center, and cars challenging each other the whole way through. And I think before we discuss, each of the teams and the drivers, we should give Pirelli a bit of a shout out, because they have given us tires in 2019 that can be pushed lap after lap without blistering or without overheating. And how many times last year did we see the case of, a car trying to overtake the car in front for 1, 2 or 3 laps and then having to basically take a break because the tires were overheating too much. And this weekend I really think we didn't see that. I mean, we saw Hamilton being able to follow Bottas closely for about 20 laps in the first stint without his tires giving up the ghost. And then also, I mean, Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen fighting so closely with each other lap after lap after lap without really having to worry about their tires was just really, really refreshing. And then I think we need to ask ourselves, if Red Bull and Ferrari got their wish in Austria 2 weeks ago to go back to the 2018 tires, would we have been able to watch the race we were watching today? Somehow I doubt it, because I do think that, teams would have had to manage their tires a lot more then than what they would have had to manage their tires today. And I think that's a big plus point, and really Pirelli delivered what a lot of the teams were asking for last year, which was, being able to push on a tire without it blistering or overheating that quickly. All right, let's talk about the race, and let's talk about, obviously, the winners of the day, which were Lewis Hamilton and his Mercedes team. So, yay, another 1-2 for Mercedes, if you're a Mercedes fan, which was, I guess, a bit expected this weekend. We all expected Mercedes to go well here. I was quite surprised by how close Ferrari and Red Bull were able to get in qualifying, which made qualifying quite interesting. I think, at one stage it looked like Ferrari might have stolen the march on Mercedes, where I think Charles Leclerc on the medium tires were basically equaling Hamilton's times on the soft tires, which was quite surprising. But then it turned out that there wasn't really a big pace differential between the mediums and the softs, which I found interesting as well. But in any case, so yes, Mercedes, they were run very close by an exceptional Charles Leclerc, but Bottas still was able to pip Lewis Hamilton by 0.006 of a second. So, I mean, Mercedes did some quick maths on Twitter and came to the conclusion that amounted to about 40 centimeters in real terms, where, it was a super close performance in terms of the Mercedes, with Leclerc less than a tenth behind them. Lewis Hamilton, he was quite disappointed with his performance, but yeah, he just couldn't hook up a really good lap in qualifying 3. Still, it was really close with Bottas, so I think at least that shows how much raw pace Hamilton did potentially have at Silverstone, given that on a lap that he described as below par, he was so close to what Bottas was able to produce. Now, I mean, qualifying aside, the race really came alive at the start, with Lewis Hamilton glued to Bottas' rear wing over the first few laps, having looks, trying to overtake all the time. And when he really got his opportunity, as soon as the DRS was allowed, he pounced. A really great battle ensued, where Hamilton switched back after Bottas went deep into the corner. Bottas roared back, though, and took back his position on the next straight. I felt it was really nice, clean and fair racing throughout. And Hamilton did admit after the race that he really tried to maintain, a good margin in between him and Valtteri's car, which I think is a nice and mature approach for Hamilton, and really sort of taking the team into consideration when racing as well. Somehow, I think if the Drivers' Championship was a bit closer at this stage, I think he would have been a bit more aggressive, and he probably would have closed the door in Bottas' face after having overtaken him initially. But anyways, it all turned out well for him at the end, and Hamilton did say that he sort of expected to come back at Bottas later on in the race on fresher tyres if he wasn't able to get the pass done at that stage. But in any case, soon after that, Valtteri Bottas pitted and Hamilton stayed out for a few more laps. And then obviously what happened is Giovinazzi was beached on the gravel, and then the safety car came out, and Bottas, having already made his pit stop, then was a bit unlucky, where Hamilton then effectively won a free pit stop, since while the safety car is deployed, everybody else has to go around slowly around the track and can't go at full speed. So Hamilton's pace in the pits relative to everybody else was a lot faster than what it would have been under normal race conditions. So Hamilton gained the position on Bottas there and was leading the race. And he did get lucky. I think we can be straight about that. But at the same time, he was also a bit more flexible in terms of his strategy, where he decided to stretch his first stint, as long as possible to come back at Bottas later in the race. Now, Valtteri obviously feels a bit slighted, and I also would feel a bit slighted and a bit, hard done by. But I guess that's how it goes in racing. You can't do anything about that. After that, pretty standard in front. Hamilton maintained his gap for the remaining laps. Bottas still had to make another pit stop, which was quite painful for him, I would have imagined, given that Hamilton was already ahead. And Bottas still had another pit stop to make, given that Mercedes put him on the medium tyres again after his first stop, after having started on the medium tyres. So, he still had to take on another set of tyres, either a hard tyre or a soft tyre, which he then did later on in the race. Now, all in all, I think Bottas did really well in qualifying, and he remained resolute in the race at the beginning. But at the end of the day, Hamilton did look like the faster driver on Sunday. I mean, I think he had the better race pace. And once again, I think we can see how cerebral Hamilton is about racing nowadays. And I think, again, it's an underrated ability that he has. Where he, if you think about at the end of the race, he point blank refused to come in and make a second pit stop, since he did a quick cost-benefit analysis in his head and correctly, in my opinion, concluded that stopping for the second time when he didn't really have to is stupid. So he ignored his team and he went on to take a nice and wonderful victory. And I think, when you look at the bigger picture, Hamilton's lead in the championship is now really substantial. And I don't really know how Bottas is going to come back. But let's wait until the summer break to really draw our conclusions. All right, now the next team up the road or down the road is Ferrari. And I think we can safely say that the two Ferrari drivers had very contrasting weekends. Let's start with Sebastian Vettel. And there's no other word, it was a disaster. A disaster. He didn't have pace in the car during qualifying, and he made let's call it a silly error in the race, driving into the back of Max Verstappen under braking. And I think it's time, I think I've probably mentioned this previously, but it's soul-searching time for Sebastian Vettel. He seemed really resigned and indifferent about everything afterwards, which to me is strange in itself. Like, I would have imagined a bit more of a fiery sort of type attitude afterwards, or I would have expected him to be a bit more upset. But he was, I guess, pragmatic, which is good. But he was just very subdued. And he hasn't been the same since, the incident in Canada. And I think his title challenge is very close to its end. If you think about, his race, before, him and Max Verstappen had their tangle, his race was average. I think he was doing well. And he obviously got lucky like Hamilton did with the safety car to end up in third place after starting in sixth. So that was nice, at least, I thought. But anyways, he finished in 16th after coming together with Verstappen, and he also got a 10-second time penalty. So obviously he would like to forget about this Sunday afternoon. Now, to me, the more concerning thing is what's actually happening on Saturday, or in qualifying specifically. And I think it's more of an issue that qualifying brought to the fore with Vettel and his current understanding and his current, let's call it, misunderstanding that he has with the Ferrari car. Now, he was quite a bit behind in terms of time when you compared him to Charles Leclerc, his teammate. And there are quite a few interesting theories about why this is. And the main theory, and this sounds very plausible to me, is the fact that, I think we all now know that Ferrari has a bit of an issue where they have a lot of understeer in especially the slower corners due to the fact that their front wing can't necessarily produce the amount of downforce needed to get the nose to dive into corners quickly. Now, to cure this problem, Ferrari has obviously taken a development path and have decided to, rework some of the aerodynamic principles that the car was built on initially. Now, an effect that all of this is having is that the rear end of the car is a lot more lively, or in other words, a bit more oversteery. So it could, sometimes kick out some oversteer, and obviously oversteer cures understeer in a way, which is obviously the approach that Ferrari is trying to take. And that is a car characteristic that Sebastian Vettel doesn't like at all. Vettel, historically, and we all saw how good he was in the Red Bull days where they had the blown diffusers and the really, really stable rear end. He really likes the rear of his car to be extremely stable and planted, and then he can sort out the front by himself. Now, this new direction that Ferrari is taking means that he no longer has that rear instability, which is also incidentally something that Charles Leclerc is very much able to handle, because that's a car setup that he's a lot more comfortable with. And someone like Lewis Hamilton as well is also quite comfortable with dealing with a car that has a bit more of an unstable rear end, where Leclerc and Hamilton both are happy to sort of sort out the mess mid-corner and not lose any lap time. Now, Vettel does not like this, and I think this is the main reason that we've seen him struggle so much, especially in qualifying over the last few races, where he's severely underperforming. If you think about the fact that he qualified 6th in France, and then, he had the problem in Austria, so we don't really know how he would have done there, and then 6th again in Silverstone, with his teammates being less than a tenth of pole position. So really, really concerning for Vettel, and it's going to be very interesting to see if he can sort out this fundamental difference between his driving style and the car that Ferrari is currently pursuing, or whether Ferrari would actually be able to accommodate Vettel's driving style in this new design direction that they're taking to catch up with Mercedes. So I think we need to keep an eye on that. But speaking about Vettel's illustrious young teammates, Charles Leclerc was probably the driver of the weekend for me. I mean, he drove the wheels of that Ferrari, and he put that car so close to pole position on Saturday and really deserved to finish on the podium on the Sunday. If you think about qualifying, he showed his pace and his renewed confidence in the team. He's now out-qualified Sebastian Vettel 3 races in a row. And as I mentioned previously, I think the French Grand Prix was a turning point for him. Vettel needs to be afraid. Very afraid. Now, the race, what can we say? His defense against Verstappen was exciting and robust. He was really making his point that he was going to race harder after what happened in Austria. He definitely got unlucky with the safety car, like Valtteri Bottas did, but he got past Pierre Gasly, who overtook him during that whole phase in an extremely impressive overtake into turn 3, I think. And then dear old Sebastian Vettel shoved himself and Max Verstappen out of the way. So Leclerc was back into the very deserved 3rd place at the end of the race. So I think, a really, really good podium for Charles. And I think he showed today that Max is definitely not going to be the only next-gen driver with some racecraft. Since what we saw today was incredible from them both. And I'm very impressed with seeing those two race. And I was shooketh, if to use the colloquial term. So very nice from Charles Leclerc there. And he's now 2 points behind Vettel in the championship, he took 4 consecutive podiums after delay. Now, what is Ferrari going to do with the internal team hierarchy, if we can call it that? Because at the moment, Leclerc seems to be the driver taking it to Mercedes a lot more than Vettel is. So I think, after the summer break, it's going to be fascinating to see what they decide. If Vettel has another average to poor performance in Hockenheim and in Hungary, Leclerc might be Ferrari's number 1 driver before we know it. And I think it's going to be well deserved. And I think, if Vettel stays on next year at Ferrari, he's going to have a very tough time, because Leclerc is just getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and Vettel is definitely not comfortable at the moment with the car and with the team. Okay, let's talk about Red Bull, the next team. Another impressive performance, I think, by them in the race and in qualifying. So well done to Honda for that. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, let's please welcome Pierre Gasly, who was finally able to string a decent race weekend together and finishing ahead of his teammate for the first time in 4th place. It was really nice to see him have a better time and just be stronger throughout. I mean, he did better than Verstappen in free practice 1, 2, and 3. He had a bit of an average qualifying, but then again, a strong performance in the race. But is this going to be enough? I think he'll need at least another couple of really strong performances like this before I would say he has a chance of retaining his seat for next year. But you have to start somewhere, right? I think this is a step in the right direction for him, and I really hope that we can have the second Red Bull also challenging the front, because then we really have a nice and exciting 6-horse race for every race for the rest of the year. Now, let's talk about Max Verstappen. He struggled initially over the weekend, which I found interesting. So he didn't really have a good time in free practice 1, 2, and 3. But they changed something just before qualifying, and then all of a sudden Verstappen was right back into the thick of things. And according to Helmut Marko, now, before I say anything further, I think everything we hear from Helmut Marko, we need to take with, I think, more than a pinch of salt, maybe 2 pinches of salt. But Helmut Marko claimed that, Verstappen had turbo lag, and without turbo lag, Max Verstappen would have been able to claim pole position. Now, I don't know if that's the truth, but anyways, I don't really care. Verstappen did do a good job, and he was very close to Mercedes, I think a 10th or something like that. So that in itself is very impressive. And I think that Honda engine is now doing all of the things, and I think they can be very proud. Now, in the race, Verstappen's battles with Leclerc, they were incredible, as I've mentioned, and most importantly, they were mature battles. They raced very hard, but they still raced fairly. But I did, however, find it funny after, in one of the sort of actions or one of the skirmishes between Leclerc and Verstappen, Leclerc made a bit of a late move under braking and then Verstappen immediately got on the radio to complain about this supposed late move that Leclerc made. Now, I just want to know, did he forget that exact move was straight from the Max Verstappen playbook, and that there literally exists a rule called the Verstappen rule that prohibits late moves in the braking zone? Anyways, I just thought it was a bit of a case of the pot calling the kettle black, because Leclerc basically did to Verstappen exactly what he used to do to all of his numerous victims. Now, after that, Max won the pit stop battle with Ferrari, and then he stopped again during the safety car to jump Charles Leclerc. And, after jumping both his teammate Gasly and Leclerc, Max set off after Sebastian Vettel, who was currently in third place, or at third place at that stage, and, caught him and overtook him. And immediately straight after that, Vettel drove into his rear end. Now, that effectively ruined his race. However, I am astonished that he didn't have more damage. I mean, he still brought the car back in fifth place, which I think was quite a good performance and an impressive showing from Verstappen there. So, yeah, overall, really strong performance by Max yet again. And he has definitely been one of the class drivers of 2019. No denying that. Okay, let's discuss the midfield. Now, McLaren, they were once again best of the rest, with Carlos Sainz again putting in a wonderful performance on the Sunday after a poor qualifying for him, where he finished 13th, I think, in qualifying. He did, however, he rose up the ranks and was one of the guys who got lucky when the safety car was deployed to take his pit stop, and he ended up jumping a couple of cars. He then held off rampaging Daniel Ricciardo in a slightly faster Renault to take 6th at the flag. So, great job by Carlos Sainz. And I mean, after, I think, making up so many places in Austria 2 weeks ago, and again making up a whole host of places today in England, I think he's really showing himself to be a bit of a Sunday afternoon monster, similar to his idol Fernando Alonso, where he can really just put in a solid drive on a Sunday and always improve and do a good job, despite maybe not having the best qualifying on the Saturday. Now, his teammate Lando Norris had the exact opposite experience to Sainz, where he was really good in qualifying, once again, beating his teammate and starting in 8th place, just behind Daniel Ricciardo. But he got caught out by the safety car, having just pitted before, and he lost out to a couple of cars. However, I do think still he performed strongly and came in 11th place. So I guess a bit of a disappointing day for Norris, but I still think the fact that, McLaren has now confirmed that Sainz and Norris are definitely staying on for them next year. It shows that, he's been putting in really good performances, and that McLaren has confidence in their current driver lineup. And I think McLaren definitely has probably one of the best driver lineups on the grid, and a lineup with an incredible amount of potential. and just the overall direction that they're going in. They have a very clear vision, a clear development direction, and another encouraging weekend for them. So good for McLaren. Let's talk about Renault next. Now, Cyril Abiteboul must be counting his lucky stars since they have rediscovered their form, thank goodness, after an abysmal performance in Austria. Daniel Ricciardo, a very good performance to be best of the rest in qualifying, so he was 7th there, and then also 7th in the race. A really strong showing once again by him, and I think so far he's been proven to be a great return on investment for Renault. So I think they're pretty chuffed that they were able to sign him, and he's really been doing a good job in that car. Now, Nico Hülkenberg, he had a bit of an issue in qualifying, but he recovered strongly in the race. I think he was running in 8th for the majority, just behind his teammates, and but then there was some strange sensor that went off on the Renault pit wall, and they told him to slow down because it showed that there was some issue with the engine. Turns out that it was just a sensor issue, and then Hülkenberg was overtaken by a few cars having slowed down to deal with the supposed engine problem. He lost his place in 8th and then ended up in 10th, I think, overtaking Alex Albon right at the end of the race to get that final point in 10th. He was quite upset after the race, which I think was justifiable, but I still think he can do great things in that team, and I really do hope that his bad luck takes a turn for the better. And I think the main conclusion that we can draw after looking at McLaren and Renault this weekend is that the fight for best of the rest is not yet over. I think McLaren is definitely in pole position, but Renault actually, I think, had the better race pace. I think they were slightly faster in the race compared to the orange team. So the question is, who is going to come out on top? I think it's going to be interesting now to see if Renault can keep their maintained and renewed momentum into the next race. Next, let's talk about Alfa Romeo. Kimi is continuing his renaissance after another great showing in the race. I think they also did decently well in qualifying in 10th and 11th, 11th and 12th, Giovinazzi and Raikkonen. Raikkonen finishing in 8th in the race. Now, poor Antonio Giovinazzi was also running quite well, I think, but apparently he had some car issue, and then that meant that he spun off into the gravel, and he was basically stuck like a beached whale. Little did he know the chaos that the ensuing safety car would cause. So, Antonio Giovinazzi did end up playing quite a pivotal role in the outcome of the British Grand Prix. I do think he deserves a bit of a pat on the back for out-qualifying Raikkonen for the 3rd race in a row. So I do think he's starting to find his feet as well. And Alfa Romeo, I think another good, consistent performance by them, but still a bit behind Renault and McLaren, I would argue. Okay, Toro Rosso. Now, with everything else going on, I completely forgot about them, and I don't feel good about it, since I'm supposed to, I need to be able to keep tabs on what's going on, from the top to the bottom of the grid, I guess. But I forgot about Toro Rosso when I was watching the race. And, shame on me, because Daniel Kvyat did such a great job to finish in 9th after starting in 17th. But, I just have no idea how he got there. As I said at the beginning of the episode, I was so shocked to see him in the points at the end. I assume he took advantage of the safety car along with everybody else, but I think regardless, we can say a really strong drive from Daniel Kvyat, and again making a big amount of noise for potentially returning to Red Bull next year, if not earlier than that. Now, Alex Albon, he was brilliant in qualifying. I thought he did a really good job. I think he started from 11th, if I'm not mistaken. And obviously Kvyat finishing way down. But, no, apologies, Albon did not finish in 11th. I think he finished a bit lower than that. But, Albon still had a disappointing Sunday, unfortunately. I think, again, he was one of the guys that got caught out by the safety car. So across a lot of the teams, there was one that benefited from the safety car and then another one that didn't benefit from the safety car. I still think Toro Rosso, they have an incredibly talented drivers lineup, so I hope things go well for both of them. But I think Toro Rosso is in a bit of a rut at the moment in terms of development. I think that some of the bigger teams or bigger midfield teams rather are out developing them at the moment. So I think, I don't know what plans they have in the pipeline, but I do hope that they can also make some good steps in actually upgrading their car. Now let's quickly talk about team racing points. I think we can just talk about how Stroll's miserable streak of qualifying 1 exits continue. Perez joined him as well for one big pink happy family out in Q1. I think they're currently having a miserable time, and hopefully the big upgrade they're planning soon is going to help, since they were just a bit anonymous in the race, except for, I guess, where Perez tried some ridiculous overtake on Hülkenberg and promptly broke his front wing. Anyway, let's talk about Haas. Long story short, they had an accident with each other. All I'm going to leave you with is Günther Steiner, Haas's team principal's words after the race, which went as follows. The best that our drivers could bring to the battle was a shovel, to dig the hole we're in even deeper. Need I say more? Okay, let's talk about Williams. Now, some noteworthy news, ladies and gentlemen. George Russell finished in 14th place, which is their highest finishing position of the year. Yes, what a time to be alive, a whole 14th place. Now, other than that, it was pretty much the status quo for Williams. Russell smashed Kubica in qualifying, and then Russell smashed Kubica in the race. Both of them still, I think, being the slowest 2 cars on the circuit. And I think now, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to the TF1 Awards for the British Grand Prix. So, the Pasta Maldonado Award for Most Dunderheaded Deed goes to Sebastian Vettel for a move straight out of Pasta's most ridiculous playbook. Not only can he spin, he can be a battering ram as well. The Lewis Hamilton #Blessed Award. This, ladies and gentlemen, will be a collective award to all of the drivers who didn't pit before the safety car, since they effectively got 20 seconds for free. Then lastly, the Nico Hülkenberg Podium Award for Unluckiest Driver. This is going to be a shared award between Valtteri Bottas and Charles Leclerc. Bottas did all of the hard work in fending off Lewis Hamilton at the start, only to be screwed over by the safety car. Charles Leclerc wins since he was brilliant in his first stint to remain third, only to be forgotten by Ferrari when the safety car was deployed, since they were too busy celebrating their main man Vettel jumping a few cars. Charles then promptly ended up in 6th. So as you can probably hear, there was a hell of a lot going on, and if we can have more races like what we had here and in Austria 2 weeks ago, I think we're going to have a wonderful 2019 season. But as always, we need to ask ourselves the most pertinent questions before we steam off to Germany next. Will Leclerc now become Ferrari's number 1 driver? Will Valtteri Bottas 2.0 need to be upgraded to Bottas 3.0, since Hamilton still seems to be a high mountain to climb? Will Renault or McLaren win the battle to be the best of the rest? And lastly, will we ever have the answer to the age-old question, does Lando Norris have pubic hair or not? So that's it for another week of F1. Thank you so much for listening to my tired and battered voice, since the day spent shouting at the TV did me no favors at all. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe if you haven't yet, or leave a nice review. I am available on all the podcasting services, so you can find me on there. Please also chat with me on Twitter, where my handle is at TF1 Show, or on Instagram, where my handle is at the TF1 Show, where we can discuss all the goings on in the world of Formula One. On that note, let's chat again next week. Bye.